All right, this is the section about the divided kingdom that begins with the divided kingdom and goes to the Assyrian captivity in 722. And so Chronicles has some of this, but or has parallels. The main thing that we want to look at probably is the Book of Kings. I'm setting an alarm for 7. So I'm encouraged you're here. You heard a story about the young preacher who was preaching verbatim the Hardeman Tabernacle sermons, and the Hardeman Tabernacle sermons were in the Ryman Auditorium. And so he had, I guess, reading them or memorized them, and he went out, preached at a little place, and there were about 10 people there. And he said, I'm really thankful that you're here, and good to have you, and good to have the people that are in the balcony as well. So we don't have a balcony. All right, as we think about the divided kingdom, the seeds of division have been there for a while, even back in Samuel's time and in the time of the judges. You remember when Gideon leads the nation against the Midianites. Hey, how are y'all? I'm not calling your name, see? They don't know who you are on the camera. Until you spoke. So back in Judges 8, the tribe of Ephraim said, well, why weren't we called? And so there was like seeds of division that were there. And often Judah and Ephraim acted independently of each other. In Saul's time, there was that seeds of division. Really was not a united monarchy until David, and that didn't last a very long time. So Solomon didn't listen to God, and God told him that the kingdom would be taken from him, but it would be after his death. And so his son Rehoboam took the throne, and so the kingdom divided, and we have Rehoboam in the south and Jeroboam in the north. When I was teaching at Lipscomb, one of my colleagues there, I thought it was really great. He called Rehoboam and Jeroboam dumb and dumber. I mean, can't you see what happened here? And now you're going to do this. So I thought that was really good. Jim Morgan's his name, so he can get credit for that. But as we look at this, and we said the primary sources of information are 1 Kings and Chronicles, and we're going to focus on Chronicles. A lot of this is supported by archaeology and the places that are there. There are some inscriptions that are found as well. All right, before we get into Rehoboam and Jeroboam, there are a couple of background things. There are some patterns that follow. In the kings of Israel, it's usually introduced as the name of the king, the name of his father, the dating in terms of the reigning monarch in Judah, like it's during this person's reign, the name of the capital city, the length of his reign, and then usually the characterization of his reign. It's usually negative in Israel. The same thing in Judah occurs. You have the name of the king, the name of his father, the date of his accession, the age by which he came to the throne, the name of the queen mother, and then is he like David or is he not like David? So as I mentioned, some of this is found in archaeological evidence, and we'll mention some of that as we go along. Shishak from Pharaoh, Shishonk in Egyptian history recorded some of his things in Egypt, and so that's recorded there. King Mishah, Moabite ruler, recorded and actually records it mentions Omri. There are some inscriptions, other things, the Siloam Tunnel inscription, where they were making that tunnel during the time of Hezekiah, and they were tunneling in from one side and tunneling in from the other side, and they actually wrote down and said, we can hear the picks on the other side over there. And that inscription, I think the Israel people try to get it back, but I think it's in Turkey maybe now. I don't know, but really be really cool to see that in a museum. But I don't. If you're going to Israel, we're not going to Turkey. All right. In the Book of Kings, there is a big problem. We're not getting into it, but the chronology of this. And it's a pretty difficult thing to try to work all this out. And people have given their lives in studying this, and they're fascinated by it. There is, I'm going to write his name up there on the board. There is a work, if you're interested in pursuing working out the chronology. Edwin Teale wrote a book called The Mysterious, Mysterious Numbers of the Hebrew Kings. And it's not light reading, but it's in various forms. I think some of it's been condensed down to a paperback that's a little more readable. But just kind of summarize what he did. He and his evidence has not been refuted by less conservative scholars. He set forth a couple of procedures that help. One related that there are separate calendars that were used in the North Nation and the South Nation. They began their years at different times. And even more confusing than that, sometimes there's overlapping of co-kings. Another was the use of a session year and non-accession year. On the non-accession year, the first year is counted as year number 1. Whereas the accession year, it's not counted till after that. It's like today. I don't know much about this. I think there's some Asian cultures that, you're born, you live for a year, that's your first birthday. In some Asian cultures, I think it's you're born, that's 1 right there. It starts 1. We have, I probably told you, we have a grandchild. He'll be 6 months this month, and his mother's always, she's got a little board or something, and she'll put 6 months on there and then take a picture. And I'll be 60 in December on my birthday, and so I've threatened her that I'm going to get a board and put 720 months and wear the same pajamas that he wears in doing that. But so there's different ways of counting, like your first year. Well, the same thing was happening with the kings, the accession year and non-accession year. And it gets a little more complicated than that. Judah used the accession year principle from Rehoboam to Jehoshaphat, and Israel used the non-accession principle from Jeroboam to Ahab generally. That's right, it wasn't consistent because you remember Ahab and Jehoshaphat kind of became related because it was sealed in the marriage of Ahab and Jezebel's daughter to Jehoshaphat's son. And then the non-accession year ended up over in Judah as well, and that remained in place for a while. So all of that's, it's confusing, but that's helpful if you're trying to work out all this chronology. Another principle is, so they're always saying this is the king now, and it's in the so-and-so year of the other nation's king, and there were different ways of determining that and mentioning that. All of those principles are helpful, in trying to untangle all this. In other words, I'm not highly interested in delving into that in great length. Yet I'm thankful that Edwin Teale was, and again, his work has not been refuted by less conservative scholars.
Some of the kings
Yeah.
So that throws the numbering off.
Yep. Yep.
As well, and so.
Yeah. Somebody reigns with their father, for a while, just like.
Like I said, I would hate to think that we had to enumerate all that chronology to get into heaven.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty difficult.
Be like when I was teaching Hebrew at Lipscomb. I said, you don't have to know Hebrew to go to heaven. You just won't understand what anybody's saying. That's a joke. Cut that. So yeah, it is. And we need people who will do that hard work, because there are scholars who will attack the Bible and say, well, this is not true because of this and these chronologies. So if you're interested, I would look up his work and read it and work through it if you want to. All right, any other thoughts or comments on that? All right, so Rehoboam is Solomon's son who takes the throne. And as you know, he, again, he's not acting in a very intelligent way. It's right there. People are about to leave, and then he goes to the old men, those who had been the counselors, I think, of Solomon, and he asks them, what should I do to give an answer to these people? And what'd they say? Let up. Yeah, let up. And then he doesn't listen to that, and he goes to his contemporaries, and they say, just make it worse. Now look at verse 15 of chapter 12.
Such an opportunity, because he could have been so loved. He's the guy who lowered taxes. He's all these things.
Yep.
And he just threw it away.
Yeah, but Dumb and Dumber, I don't know, Jeroboam threw it away.
God promised him.
Yeah.
God said, I'll make of you a dynasty if you'll listen to me. But he doesn't.
You've got to remember this. That's what God intended.
Yeah.
It happened as God intended.
Yeah, we have the verse in 1 Kings 12:15. Somebody read that, please.
So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord had spoken to Ahijah the Shilonite, to Jeroboam the son of Nebat.
All right. So remember earlier, the prophet met Jeroboam. He's from Egypt, been down there in Egypt, but he met him, and he worked in Solomon's government, but not really from Egypt, I guess. He worked in Solomon's government, and then he fled to Egypt. But he has friends in Egypt. So, but the prophet met him, and through a object lesson, said that he would receive 10 of the tribes. And so we're told here this was a turn. It was providence from God that Rehoboam didn't listen to the people. Now, Rehoboam had free will. He could have made the choice or not made the choice, but God in his providence is working through this to establish that word. I can't work out all that. God is sovereign, and yet humans have free will. And God had prophesied through the prophet that this will happen. Rehoboam has a choice, and he makes the wrong decision. So yeah, as you said, James, God is working in this.
I've heard people say that Jacob and his mother had no lied to Esau. Jacob and his mother had not lied to his daddy. God could have worked his plan. That's not right. God would have worked his plan.
Yeah, God is sovereign. He works. And again, the hero of the Bible is God. It's not any human, and he will work his will in the end.
Rebecca and Isaac, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So God is working in all this, and when all the people saw that he didn't listen to them, they take up this old cry from 2 Samuel 20 and verse 1. What share do we have in David? To your tents, O Israel. Look after your own house, O David. So we're leaving, and the kingdom divided. So Rehoboam in the south, Jeroboam in the north, and there's a period of instability and insecurity in both nations here, really. So we don't have a lot of information of the new kingdom in the north, and from Kings. The Chronicles doesn't tell us much more. He even ignores the first 4 Israelite kings. But we know of Jeroboam, and he is actually his name, and Jeroboam son of Nebat becomes a refrain for evil. These kings, you were like Jeroboam son of Nebat. And he eventually established his capital at Tirzah. His reign lasted 22 years. He'd been promised an unending dynasty if he had walked faithful with God. That's in 1 Kings 11. But he becomes the paradigm for evil that other kings are measured by.
He caused Israel to sin. Not
Yes.
that he was evil, but he caused it.
That's right. Yeah. Well, what did he do? Right here at the beginning.
Set up his own priesthood, his own place of worship, the whole thing, to discourage people from going back to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
He changed the place of worship, time of worship, and
Yeah.
the object of worship.
Yeah, and the leaders, he had priests from all, just, it says he took leaders from all sorts of people.
And it's during this, like you said, this time of instability, this window, this is, the Levites have been planted in all those different cities. It's during that time the faithful ones anyway, migrate down and end up in Jerusalem.
Yeah, I'm sure there were not many Levites up in the north, if any.
By
Yeah,
the time Jeroboam was finished with his administration, I'm sure there were none almost.
His downfall was he devised this in his own heart.
yes. Well, it's in chapter 12, isn't it? What is it? It says in verse 28, he made the calves of gold. Yeah, in verse 26, he said in his heart. It's a thought. The people are going to go back down there, so I got to do something to keep them up here. And so he made 2 calves of gold, and he said, "You've gone up long enough to Jerusalem." And then the phrase that's used here is the same exact phrase that's used in Exodus in the Hebrew. "Behold, your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt."
And there's also a golden calf. How about?
Exactly, yeah. 2 golden calves. And he made priests out of all sorts of people. He set this up in Dan. Dan's in the extreme north, and Bethel is right near the border. And it's like he gave the impression that it's more convenient for you to go here, whereas it's not much further from Bethel to Jerusalem. And he changed the date of the feast, or a feast that's like probably, I guess, the Sukkot tabernacles. And he, in verse 33 of chapter 12, he invented this in his own heart. There are some parallels, between Aaron and Jeroboam. They both constructed golden calves, presumably to please the people. Both used the same formula. "Behold, here are your gods, O Israel, led you out of the land of Egypt." They both have 2 sons that are essentially the same names, Nadav, Avihu, or Aviyah, and they did this and displeased God. Okay, basically what we're going to do is kind of go chapter by chapter in Kings. So we're in 1 Kings chapter 13. What happens in chapter 13? And if you have any comments or questions, Please speak up. God's stepping in now, isn't he? And
God sends a man to prophesy.
yeah, an unnamed man of God came to Bethel, and I guess Jeroboam has also taken upon himself the place of a priest. He's standing by the altar to offer. And this man of God cried against the altar, and he prophesies that a son shall be born to the house of David, and he names him Josiah, and on this altar, on you, he shall sacrifice the priests of the high places that offer on you, and men's bones shall burn on you. And he gave in verse 3 a sign. That's a couple of words, Hebrew words for sign. The word here means something like a wonder or a sign, but it's also something that brings intimidation. It's not just something that points something out. It's, I guess, like an omen. He gave a sign that same day, and he said, here's the sign. This altar shall be broken, and the ashes that are on it shall be poured out. From Leviticus, the priests were to take the ashes and carry them out. The word for ashes here is the word that means fatness, that comes from the animals. And so they were to take that deshin, that fatness, and carry it out to an unclean place. It's in Leviticus 6. So, but this is just going to be broken and it'll be poured out. Now, when the king heard this, you got to stop this. He stretched out his hand and he gives the order to have him arrested, but his hand withered, dried up. I guess stiffened, or he couldn't move. Became rigid. And the altar in verse 5 was broken, the ashes poured out according to this omen. And the king answered, said to this man of God, it's almost now, please now, since his arm's like that, please now for the favor of the Lord, and pray for me that my hand may be restored to me. Pray for me. And the man of God entreated the Lord, and the king's hand was restored, became as before. He should have learned a lesson from that, shouldn't he? Thoughts on that?
So should Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, but he didn't.
That's right. By the way, the word for pray in Hebrew, hitpalel, is in a form, hitpael is a form which means to act upon yourself, make yourself something. And so the word for pray means make. Palel means an assessment. Make yourself the object of God's assessment or God's intervention or God's judging. And it's interesting, you can look on the internet and do some more study about the Hebrew word for prayer. This is the general word for prayer. It's hitpalel, hitpalel. And it's in the hitpael form, which means you make yourself the object of God's palel, of God's assessment. And so he entreated the Lord, and his hand was restored. Then we have at the end, toward the end of that chapter, that strange episode of the man of God and then the old prophet. And the king said, "Come home with me, and I'll give you a reward." And he said, "If you gave me half your house, I won't go with you. And even I won't even eat, drink water, eat bread or drink water, because I was charged by the Lord. You don't eat bread, you don't drink water, and you don't go by the way that you came." I guess possibly because he could be overtaken by somebody. But he says, I will listen to God about that. Then we're told that there was an old prophet in Bethel, and one of his sons came and told him all what happened there. And the father said, "Where'd he go?" And they had watched where he went. And so he said, "Saddle up the donkey," and saddle it. And he went and he found him. And he said, you the one that caused all this, did all this?" And he said, "I am." And he said, "Well, come home with me and eat bread." And he gives the same statement, doesn't he? That God has commanded me not to do this. And what did the old prophet say?
I also
Yeah,
am
he
a
came
prophet.
to me too, yeah.
Yeah, I have a word from God. But in verse 18, he lied to him. And so he went back with him and he ate bread in his house and drank water. And then the word of the Lord came to the prophet that brought him back, and judgment's going to come upon this man because he didn't listen to God. This is a strange episode.
What's the motivation?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder, why is it here, and why would he lie like that as well? Any thoughts that y'all have?
What's his motivation,
I just have one observation. We can't judge people in their eternal destiny. But I'll come a whole lot nearer seeing the young prophet in heaven than I will the old prophet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The prophet, the young prophet said, "The Lord told me this," and then the old prophet lied to him. So.
And many years ago, G.K. Wallace was doing a tent meeting. I forget where it was, but it's been going on for a few nights, and a lady stood up before he would preach and says, "The Lord has told me to tell you not to preach tonight." What would you do with that? If somebody.
Yeah.
So he says, "What time did he tell you that?" And so she said, like 5 o'clock this afternoon. He said, "Well, at 6:30 he told me to go ahead."
You have to know GK to appreciate it.
You've been overridden.
I wonder if he just wanted to entertain him, just to talk to him, to delay
get to know him, yeah, it's
just to
something,
find
yeah.
out what he knew that he didn't know, or
That's strange.
very odd.
What's the old prophet's motivation, for doing this? I don't understand that.
So was he a false prophet or a real prophet?
He was just, it says, a prophet, and he lied.
He was a lying prophet.
Yeah.
I think he was a true prophet.
Yeah, I think he was a real prophet.
He's called in verse 11 an old prophet.
Yeah, but he lied.
And then it says he lied.
I'm not sure what his motivation was.
And
God gave him the real revelation.
yeah,
Told the young man.
yeah. The word of the Lord came to the prophet that brought him back. And he cried to him. If I were the young prophet, the first question I have, but why would you do this? But we don't even have that in the text of why this is. And it's just strange. And it's strange, why is this recorded? I mean, in this section.
I don't know, but there's lessons in everything for us.
Yeah, there's certainly lessons, yeah.
New Testament says test the spirits.
Mm-hmm. And well, it came to pass as God told the old prophet in the end, and the young prophet was killed by a lion, and the lion didn't eat the prophet or the carcass of the donkey there as well. Really,
He wasn't hungry. He was doing God's work.
yeah, he was controlled like God controlled the big fish and Jonah.
The old folks in Madison County used to believe it was a waste of time to read the Old Testament because we don't go by the Old Testament. This is ridiculous. That there is very important.
Yeah.
How God acts, how He reacts. What he did to David when David took the Ark of the Covenant on the cart.
Yeah. All Scripture is in God breathed.
God was very unfair to Adam and Eve because they didn't do much bad.
All right, verse 33 then, after this thing, and this thing there would be, I think, not the episode with the old prophet and young prophet, but what happened at the altar. After this thing, Jeroboam did not return from his evil way, but he he made again from among, it's just all sorts of people, just from all the extremity, the word means end, from the extremities, from the end of all people, priests, the high places, whoever he wished. And he filled their hands, he consecrated them. That's a term that's used in Exodus 28:41 of ordaining a priest, fill the hand. He ordained, he consecrated them that be one of the priests of the high places. And by this thing there was sin to the house of Jeroboam to cut it off, destroy it from the face of the earth. All right, chapter 14, at that time, we're still in Jeroboam in the north. At that time, Aviah, the son of Jeroboam, fell sick, and Jeroboam said to his wife, get up and go to, disguise yourself first, and then go to the prophet who spoke. Notice he says, go to the prophet who spoke concerning me that I should be king over this people. Well, that's what the prophet told him, you remember? And then he also told him, if you listen to God, you'll continue on. Apparently he didn't think that's important. Go talk to the prophet who said I'd be king. And she did so, and she went to Shiloh. And this prophet, Achijah, couldn't see because his eyes are fixed or set, and because he's old. And the Lord said, look, the wife of Jeroboam is coming, and the son is sick, and you say to her what I tell you to say. And he heard the sound of her feet, and he said, come in, wife of Jeroboam. Why are you disguised? Go tell Jeroboam, thus says the Lord, I exalted you from among the people, made you prince over my people Israel, tore the kingdom away from the house of David, gave it to you, and you have not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments, who followed me with all his heart. You've done evil above all that were before you. That's interesting, because who was before him?
That king don't nobody.
Yeah. So
Solomon was before him, he was the king of all of them.
yeah, maybe that's what it's talking about. And you made other gods and molten images, and you've cast me behind your back. Therefore, I'll bring evil on the house of Jeroboam and will cut off every male child. If you have the King James, it has something else there.
It's an interesting story there. Freed Hardeman, a young lady, was reading that text, and she came to that and stopped.
I guess in the King James.
Yeah. The professor said man-child. She said, why, sir? Said man-child. And then she said, every one that man-child is against the wall.
Oh.
Say that again.
Everyone that man-child is against the wall.
What's interesting, this phrase occurs 2 other times in this section through chapter 17 of 2 Kings. It occurs here, it occurs in 1 Kings 16:11 and 1 Kings 21:20. So it's complete destruction against the house of Jeroboam. It's an idiom in there which means a male child. If you don't know what the King James says, I'll let you look that up and read it. It will be complete. The one who dies of Jeroboam in the city, the dogs will eat. The one who dies in the field, the fowls of the air will eat, because the Lord has spoken this. And so he's telling the wife of Jeroboam this about their sick child, and he says, when your feet enter the city, the child shall die. And the Lord will raise up a king over Israel who will cut off the house of Jeroboam. It's like shaking a reed. It's just the whole kingdom's instability characterizes it, and I'll scatter. And so she gets up, and she went and came to Tirzah, and she came to the threshold of the house. The child died, and they mourned him. And then we have in verse 19 the summary of Jeroboam, the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred, how he reigned. Are they written in the books of Chronicles of the kings of Israel? That's not talking about the book of Chronicles. It's talking about a record that we don't have. In the days which he reigned 22 years, and he slept with his fathers, and Nadav, his son, reigned in his stead. Did everybody get this handout? Where are they? Okay. I don't know. Did y'all get one? Okay. All right. So I really wish this had, and I guess with further time I could have found a chart that had the references in the book of Kings beside each one, but you can write that in. But this gives the list on both sides, and roughly as they're parallel to each other in the dates that are there. So we have Jeroboam the first, and his son is Nadav. Over in Judah, you have Rehoboam and Abijah reigning. So we pick back up in verse 21 of chapter 14 with Rehoboam, the son of Solomon. And we have a summary. He's 41 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name, who is the queen mother, I guess, Naamah. And Judah did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. They moved him to jealousy with their sins which they committed above all that their fathers had done. So it's not much better over in Judah as it is in Israel. And it mentions they built high places, pillars, asherim, on every high hill, under every leafy tree. And there were, in verse 24, how do you have that translated in the land?
Male cult prostitute.
Yeah, male cult prostitutes. It's the word for holy, kana. And yeah, and I said kana is kadash. Kadash means holy, but it's male cult prostitutes, perverted people in a sense that way. Men and women could be included probably, but it's probably just men who are devoted to immorality. And they did toivah, they did abominations of the nations which the Lord drove out before the children of Israel.
Apparently that was not immediate, because when you look at the parallel in 2 Chronicles 11, when we were talking about the Levites coming, in 2 Chronicles 11:16 it said the Levites, those from all the tribes, so it wasn't just Levites, such as set their heart to seek the Lord God, came to Jerusalem to sacrifice. They strengthened the kingdom and made Rehoboam, son of Solomon, strong for 3 years because he walked in the way of David and Solomon. So for 3 years, apparently Rehoboam was more in the right, but after that third year, he took a nosedive, I guess, apparently. So.
And you got to wonder why. I mean, again.
Apparently he started well with all those devout people, the Levites and the other devout people from the other tribes coming. That was a big boost, apparently, but it didn't last.
My guess is that those young men said, look, who's king here? The men you consulted or you?
Yeah.
Who's in charge? If they did, that went to his head.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So, yeah, there's a period there where he's listening to God. I mean, it's like Solomon. I mean, Solomon's first part of his reign is he loves the Lord, but his heart is led astray. And this is really no surprise that this is Solomon's son, that this happens. Now, in verses 25 through 28, there's a record here in 1 Kings chapter 14 of Shishak that we talked about, king of Egypt, and Jeroboam Jeroboam fled to Egypt at one point, and so he's had some relations with Jeroboam, and so he comes in Rehoboam's 5th year into Judah, and in Egypt he lists some 150 cities that he conquered, and on a wall down there. And he moves through southern Judah, and he came to the walls of Jerusalem, and he took vast treasures from Jerusalem, and he returned to Egypt with just an enormous amount of gold. It's almost it's Rehoboam just gave it to him. Just, leave me alone. Here's some gold. From 2 Chronicles 12, Shishak was going to control the whole land, but Rehoboam listens to a prophet, and we're told he had a repentant heart. 2 Chronicles 12, 6 and 7. He was given some measure of deliverance. But it's really interesting here, or sad, that he took all the shields of gold which Solomon made. In verse 27, King Rehoboam, what did he make and put in their place? Yeah, bronze. And he even committed them to the hands of the captains of the guards who kept the door of the king's house, and they guarded them, brought them back into the guard chamber, maybe like a parade, and then bring it back in. Might even polish the brass or the bronze. Might even, the people don't know much, and trying to keep it from the people, kept in ignorance of this humiliating thing. At the end of chapter 14, we have the summary again. The rest of the acts of Rehoboam, all he did, they're written in the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah. And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. And he died, he was buried. And we're told again his mother's name was Naamah, the Ammonite. And then his son, Abijam, reigned in his stead. All right, comments, questions on chapter 14? One thing, 2 Chronicles 12:12 says the final 12 years of Rehoboam's reign after his run-in with Shishak and his encounter with a prophet, Shemaiah, or the chronicler says he humbled himself, and the Lord's anger turned from him, and he was not totally destroyed. So,
Verse 14 of that same chapter says, but he did not prepare his heart
yep,
to seek the Lord.
Yep.
So he was only doing it to stay out of trouble.
yep.
Really, is what it was.
It's almost like God, all right, I'll give you a reprieve, sort of like with Solomon. The kingdom's going to be taken from you, but it will be after your death. All right.
What was the name of the Pharaoh that killed Josiah? Was that Shishak?
Necho.
Necho.
Yeah. That'd be later.
But is Shishak a Pharaoh?
Shishak and Shishonk are thought. Yeah, his Egyptian name would be Shishonk. He roughly Shishonk the first, 945 to 924 BC. Founded the 22nd dynasty in Egypt. So, and there's, as I said, at Karnak, in the Temple of Ammon in Egypt, there is a wall there where he lists 150 cities in Palestine that he conquered, which is during this time period. All right, Rehoboam's son, so we're still on Rehoboam, as chapter 15 opens up. And his name, Abijam, also called Abijah, and he did not follow in the ways of David, yet we're told in verse 4, for David's sake the Lord his God gave Rehoboam a lamp in Jerusalem by raising up a son to succeed him. So this is that son. Abijah had 22 sons and 16 daughters from 14 wives. Now, eventually he's going to face Jeroboam. And Jeroboam's army outnumbered his. And he wants to win back, so he's Rehoboam's son. He wants to win back all the people that have left Judah. And he believes that the kingdom of Jeroboam is an illegitimate kingdom. And he argues that the calves are idols, idolatrous worship against the will of God. And basically what he does, he orders Jeroboam and his breakaway kingdom to come back. Well, Jeroboam didn't really pay any attention to that. And he surrounded Abijah's army front and back, and Abijah was miraculously rescued. He was able to deliver a blow to Jeroboam by capturing some cities. Now, Abijah's son lost those cities as well. So, in verse 7 is the summary of his reign. We just have a couple of verses about him. All right, and his son in verse 9 is Asa. And for 41 years he reigned in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, and the daughter of Aveshalom. And a lot of people think that's Absalom. His father is David, but that's talking about his grandfather, and he put away the male prostitutes that we saw earlier out of the land and removed all the idols that his father had made. But in verse 13, what did he have to do to his mother? She's queen mother. She has a lot of... had to dethrone her because she had made this repulsive image. It's a horror for Asherah.
She got a vote of no confidence.
Yes, exactly. And he cut down that image and burned it in the brook Kidron. And that image probably was, this is not rated G, it's probably a phallic image.
It's an obscene image.
Yes, obscene, related to Asherah. But, so he did some good, didn't he? I mean, he put the male prostitutes out, removed the idols, dethroned his mother, cut down the image that she had made. But then verse 14, the high places were not taken away. It says, yet his heart was whole with the Lord all his days. And he, in a sense, replaced some of the things in the temple. Toward the end of his life, I guess prompted by his success, he became proud and haughty, and he mistreated a prophet of God, imprisoned him, and it says he was diseased in his feet. And that might be a euphemism for genitals. Sometimes it is in the Hebrew Bible. I don't know if I'd push that, but the main thing is he entrusted this disease entirely to his physicians, which was probably more a combination of magic and medicine. All right, verse 16, he's still reigning, but there's a challenge from the king of Israel. The king of Israel, Baasha, went up against Judah, and he fortified. He built up Ramah and Asa considers that a threat to security, and he takes steps to get help from the king of Damascus. And his name is Ben-Hadad. And he's king of Aram. His capital is in Damascus. And he appeals to him, but Ben-Hadad was already in agreement. He's in a covenant in agreement with Baasha, and Asa is going to appeal to him, and he's going to offer him some money, and that's going to buy him out of that. So he says, I've sent you a present of gold. Go break the league or the covenant with Baasha. So money talks. In verse 20, he listened to King Asa, and he sent the captains of the armies against the cities of Israel, and he struck all these places. So he's willing to break that other covenant and treaty if, the money is given to him. And so he goes and attacks all these cities, and Baasha hears of this, and he's trying to fortify Ramah, but he can't keep doing that if that Ben-Hadad is over there taking all these cities from him. So he says, well, I've got to go take care of that. In verse 23, the rest of the acts of Asa and all his mights he did, and the cities he built, and they're written in this Chronicles. And then we're told of the disease in his feet. And he slept with his fathers, and he was buried. And his son, Jehoshaphat, reigned in his place. So that's the southern kingdom. Nadav, the son of Jeroboam, that's the northern kingdom. If you're on the list there, so we're just 2 kings down, 2 or 3 down. We have 2 kings down on Nadav and Baasha. But Nadav, the son of Jeroboam, began to rule over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and walked in the way of his father. Thoughts, comments? All right, Baasha is constantly attacking him, or it's a problem there. And so he conspired against him, verse 27, struck him at, and this is Nadav, the son of Jeroboam. And he struck him at Gibeton as they were laying siege. And so in verse 28, Baasha killed him and reigned in his stead. And as soon as he is king, he struck all the house of Jeroboam. He left not to Jeroboam any that breathed. He destroyed, which fulfills that word by the prophet Achijah. For the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, and which he made Israel to sin, because of his provocation. So the rest of the acts of Nadav and all that he did, that's written in the Chronicles as well. All right, so verse 33, in the 3rd year the king of Asa began Baasha the son to reign, and he reigned, and he did what was evil. Thoughts, comments on chapter 15? All right, in chapter 16, the word of the Lord comes to Jehu. And said against Baasha, I exalted you out of the dust, made you prince over my people, but you walked in the way of Jeroboam. You made Israel who made Israel to sin, provoked me. So I'm going to sweep away Baasha and his house, and I'll make his house like the house of Jeroboam. And it gives the same wording there. And then we have a summary of Baasha. It's how that it's written in the Chronicles of the Kings, and how he died. Slept with his fathers. Also, by the hand of the prophet Jehu came the word of the Lord against Baasha because of the evil that he did. And we have in verse 8 the next king of the northern kingdom, Elah is his name. So Asa is still king of Judah. And that's what makes this kind of confusing, because it's like, okay, we're over here, in the south, and now we're back in the north, but that's still going on over there in the south. So we're up to Elah and Zimri. Questions, thoughts before we take a break?
When it says that Jehu is the prophet, is the son of Hanani. Is that the prophet that Asa, Hanani, his father, is that the prophet that Asa put in prison? Because that's the same name.
I don't know. And that's from Chronicles, where we're told that he put it in prison.
16 is the same name. That's who Asa got kicked off at.
Yeah, he put him in prison.
It's the same name, so I wonder if it's the same prophet, if it's his son.
It could be. I don't know.
Time frame would work.
Yeah, it fits in the same time frame, so it could be. It would not be a surprise if it is. It's a good question. All right, anything else? Let's take a break for, 10 minutes? All right, well, back to the text. 16:8, Asa dies, and Asa was king of Judah, and in his 6th year, Elah, the son of Baasah, began to reign. And Elah reigned for just a mere 2 years. And for some reason, just as Baasah had found this place, Gibbeton, attractive, Elah laid siege to it as well, and he sent his general, Omri, to lay siege against it. And while Elah was there, another military figure, Zimri, rose up and assassinated him. Because, verse 9, he was in Tirzah drinking himself drunk, it says. And Zimri destroyed all the house of Baasah, and in keeping with the word of God as well. And the summary in verse 13, all the sins of Baasah, the sins of Elah, his son, they made Israel to sin, provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, with their emptiness, with their, idols. It's the word for, in
Footnote says vanities.
it is. It's hevel. It's the word that's in Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, of vanities, emptiness. And then we have the summary, the rest of the acts of Elah and all that he did, written in the book of the Chronicles. So verse 15, the next king in the northern kingdom. Yeah.
Go back up there to verse 9, in the house of Marza.
Yeah.
Is that a person or
Yeah.
a god?
It's a person
Okay.
who probably could have been associated with the king's assassination. He,
That was 2 years, just basically. Kind
2
of
years.
a reset button.
Yeah. So he's drinking in the house of Barzah. Anything else on that?
We think about these nations today that have these coups and overthrows and things. This is
That's what this is, coup d'etat.
instability,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
That's been difficult to live in the northern kingdom at different times.
Yep.
When these things are going on.
And this happened, but so Zimri is now king, but Omri was Elah's general. And when he learned of that assassination, he's out there besieging that city, and he has himself declared as king. And he went to Tirzah, the capital. He subdued, Zimri is there, and basically, I don't know what all happened, but he forced Zimri to commit suicide by burning the palace down over himself. And Zimri, so Elah's rule was 2 years. How long was Zimri's rule?
7 days.
7 days, yeah. And then,
Word didn't even get to the outskirts of the territory.
yeah, new king. No, wait,
First week in your last week,
Yeah.
same thing.
new king. So Omri is now king.
And it's no wonder they had no spiritual direction. 'Cause
Yeah, exactly, with this going on. And Omri is going to set up a dynasty that's going to be the worst one ever in the northern kingdom. But as this is going on, another person by the name, if you look on the list there, Tivni, who follows Zimri, also set himself up as king over the northern kingdom. So, and this is for 4 years. So basically now in the northern kingdom you have Omri and you have Tivni.
verse 21, they divided into 2 parts.
Yeah. Finally, Omri was able to overcome Tivni and establish the new dynasty of Omri. And this is one of the most enduring dynasties in the northern kingdom, but also one of the worst. And, yeah, well, I guess, I don't know, what can you say with the ones that's gone before, but you got people like Ahab. So, the house of Omri, and even, too, when you think about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, the southern kingdom is basically landlocked. And the northern kingdom has access, they have access to the sea and everything else. And so they also have relations with other people around, and that brings in money. So I'd say probably from an economic, political standpoint, the southern kingdom was at a disadvantage. Now the temple is there, and the Levites are there, but then again, as we know what's eventually going to happen, that's no guarantee. But the house of Omri has probably the upper hand in wealth, power over Judah. And again, they're going to enter into an alliance with Ahab and Jezebel's daughter and Jehoshaphat's son, and probably all that was motivated, it's political, was probably motivated maybe by finances and other things. Now, about this time, there are new powers that are growing stronger and stronger and stronger. On the syllabus, and I don't know what I was thinking when I made that syllabus, but tonight's class would be the divided kingdom to the Assyrian slavery, and then I had on there Assyrian history. We're not going through all the Assyrian history. We'll mention some of these people, but they,
Out on your own.
yeah, you're on your own on that. They're growing in power. Syria and Assyria are growing in power, and that's threatening Israel. And if Israel's going to survive, they've got to drop all this petty scrapping back and forth with Judah by looking at priorities and say, at least for the time being.
Because that was a battle on both ends.
Yep, yeah.
A battle in the north and a battle in the south. They couldn't divide their army up like that to be effective.
Yeah. Now, this section here, or this time period of this Omri dynasty, Omri, and his son Ahab, and the dynasty that's there. We have this evidence here in Kings. We have evidence in Chronicles. We have also some inscriptions, the Mesha inscription from Moab. Shalmaneser III mentions some of this material as well. He's an Assyrian king. I guess that's the Assyrian history right there. He's an Assyrian king. The Black Obelisk and others. And also this time period is pretty well established in archaeology. And it was, like for Ahab and others during this time, it was a pretty prosperous time period. Ahab's building putting ivory inlay and everything in his palace, and he's living it up there. So Omri was a pretty big deal politically, but the writer of Kings doesn't give much space to him because it's a theological document. And it just sums it up. Look at 16:24. He just says, 23 and the 31st year of Asa, king of Judah, so he's still going down there, began Omri to reign over Israel, and he reigned 12 years. 6 years he reigned in Tirzah. And he bought the hill of Samaria, of Shemer. He built on the hill. He called the name of the city which he built after the name of Shemer, and the owner of the hill, Samaria. So he did a lot more building and a lot more things than that. But Samaria becomes the capital of the northern kingdom, and the Assyrians are going to come in and they capture Samaria. But Omri, from the evidence, he had even put other kings in subjection, other foreign kings and things of that sort.
He put the name Samaria in the rest of Bible history.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But the writer of Kings just says, well, he built that there. And then verse 26, he walked in all the way of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. And in his sins, he made Israel to sin, provoked the Lord God of Israel with their, again, idols, or their vanities, their emptiness.
It's saying about he's worse than all before him, and then it just,
Yep.
and I think Ahab, it says that about him.
Yep. So, again, politically, and I guess as a king in a powerful way, he did a lot more than what's recorded in Scripture. But as a religious leader, he was bad. He didn't listen to God. And it may be why, as we began, with Ahab, we have a large block of material with prophets at this time period. And some of that's difficult to fit in exactly. It's not going chronologically in all of this, but you have these Elijah narratives, you have unnamed prophets, Micaiah, Elisha. So that's where the focus is in this text. All right. Any questions, comments on chapter 16 before we continue on?
Was Omri as successful as he was because he was a military leader? The other
Could be.
does not seem to be that caliber.
Could be. I mean, it's an interesting time period because there's success, really, from a cultural standpoint and everything, but there's extreme failure in a religious way.
Omri was one of the greatest leaders of that,
Yeah.
politically,
Yes.
of that area.
In fact, in the inscriptions, they describe Israel as the house of Omri. Now, so we got Aram and the Syrians, and then we have the Assyrians, and there are going to be some Assyrians mentioned. We've already seen Kadad, Ben Kadad, and he is a Syrian leader. But starting around this time, they're starting to feel the pressure from Assyria as well. And again, you can look up the list of the kings of Assyria, but in 722 is when the northern kingdom goes into slavery, and Shalmaneser the fifth is the Assyrian leader at that time. All right. Omri conquered Moab, which was a pretty big feet, and it's mentioned in the Moabite stone. And he's called Omri, king of Israel, and he must have had a pretty good army to conquer the Moabites. He made alliance with Phoenicia, and he sealed that, in that his son married a daughter of a Phoenician king. And so his son Ahab married Jezebel. And that's probably one of the worst marriages that ever could have been for God's people, because Jezebel was clear where her loyalties were. And so she tried to exterminate all the prophets of the Lord and bring in Baal as the official worship. I think I've told you before, when I was working on a degree that I never did finish, my supervisor, his name is William Domeris, Domeris. He has some YouTube videos. He's done archaeological work. He's a Hebrew scholar. And in one of those videos, he talks about some work that he did archaeologically in Jerusalem that dates to the time of Ahab. And he said every house in Jerusalem that was uncovered during that time, they date to that time period, in every house they found a little statue of Baal. That's how prevalent it was. It's everywhere. And that's why we have Elijah shows up on the scene and challenges Ahab. So we have Ahab and Jezebel. Now again, Ahab, he ruled for 22 years, and he had some success and politically. Building programs he continued of his father, and Samaria has been excavated. I can't remember if the Israel trip we're going to Samaria or not, but he built a wall there. Casemate wall is what archaeologists call it, and it's let me see, it's a double wall that's 6 feet thick on the outer wall, 4 feet thick on the inner wall, with 23 feet of space in between the two. So this, that's a pretty fortified wall. And those walls have been discovered, and also some of the ivory at Samaria has been discovered that Amos denounced, because Ahab's basically living it up, and he has palaces in different places, summer palaces, and he wants a vegetable garden, and he just tries to get it, and his wife said, "Well, I'll get it for you." He built the Pool of Samaria, it says. They're also at Megiddo, and I can't remember if we're going to Megiddo or not, but Megiddo is an interesting place. There's so many levels of civilization on Megiddo. It's a mound. And the Egyptians controlled it at various times, but Ahab controlled it at various times. And the horse stables, been discovered there. And originally some thought, well, this is Solomon's horse stables. But it's now been, now it's thought that it's Ahab's horse stables. And we're not talking about recreational riding. We're talking about, chariots, and war. By the way, if you don't know, Megiddo, in Revelation, you have Armageddon. The Hebrew word for mountain is Har. And so Har, Megiddo. And in the Valley of Jezreel, that's an ancient battle place. And that's picking up on that picture with that word Armageddon. The battle wouldn't be on top of the mountain of Megiddo. The battle's in the valley down there. But it's a symbolic term of an ultimate battle. That's what it's saying. Also, Ahab, let's see if I can find that year. There was a battle of Karkar. You can look that up, but he joins with Ben-Hadad, It's going to be later on. I can't find it here. Yeah, here it is. 853. The Syrian kings are marching through the land under Shalmaneser III, and Ahab joins with Ben-Hadad, and he's going. It's 12 kings. They're going to oppose the Assyrians with that, but the text, the extra biblical text, says that Ahab sent 2,000 chariots and 10,000 soldiers to that. And the reason I bring that up in chapter 20, and we'll see this later on, but in 1 Kings 20, he allows Ben-Hadad to live, and they come, and Ben-Hadad sends messengers first, and he says, we're wondering if you can enter into some kind of agreement and take care of Ben-Hadad. And Ahab said, is he alive? He's my brother. And it used to be thought, well, he's just concerned about his welfare, so he calls him his brother. He probably calls him his brother because they were in alliance together at the Battle of Karkar against the Assyrians. But all this, again, is showing that Ahab has pretty good military strength. Yet, the big problem in Kings is Ahab and Jezebel's Baal worship and the worship of the people. Let me stop there and see if you have any comments or questions.
Just think about this Battle of Armageddon. In the Valley of Jezreel, Alabama and Tennessee wanted to bring their militia in there. They'd just about fill it up. I don't know how China and Russia and all these are going to get in there together to fight that final battle.
Maybe you never read Ezekiel. No. Yeah, it's a symbolic battle, and even the name. I mean, even the name. I think ancient people would know. You don't fight the battle on top of the mountain. It's fought in the valleys, but it's Har-Megiddo. It's this Armageddon, and it occurs in a book that tells us that it has symbols in it as well. All right. Anything else? Thanks, James.
Are we in 20 yet?
No, we're not in 20. We're gonna.
Just mention that.
Yeah, I just mentioned that because he says he's my brother.
I'm sure I made a great contribution.
You did. We need to go through the Elijah thing quickly here. We spent a lot of time on this in chapter 17, 18, and 19. So, because of the sin of Ahab, there is a famine in the land. And by the way, Elijah's name in Hebrew, Eliyahu. But you have Eliyah. And maybe I'll write this up here. And you may know this, but I'm going to write it.
Our knowledge of Hebrew, I'm not sure we know it.
You probably know this. The name, or a general word for God in Hebrew, is El. We've talked about that. Hebrew puts pronominal suffixes on a word, and so to say my God, you add that, Eli. And when Jesus cries out on the cross, he says, Eli, Eli, my God. Either Aramaic or Hebrew, Eli. And so, Eli means my God. Yah is the personal name of God, Yahweh. And by the way, and just real quick while I'm here, and we'll do this, but that's 4 consonants. The Tetragrammaton. Y's and J's are sometimes interchangeable, so that becomes a J. W and V's are interchangeable, so it's a Vav. Yod He Vav He is what that Hebrew is. So you have a V, and then you have another H. And then vowels were added to that from Adonai, and so you have Jehovah. And that's that derivation of Jehovah. Jehovah is a made-up term. Yahweh and we're not exactly sure that's how you pronounce it, Yahweh or Yahweh. and it would have been pronounced. It was pronounced, but as you know, the Jewish people, if those of you going to Israel, you'll see even in some of the literature, maybe pamphlets or things that they may hand out some of the places, and it'll have God on there. It won't spell out God. It will say, or it'll have like that, so you don't have the full thing. And that goes back to the where God's said, the Jewish people say, it goes back to where God said, "You should not take my name in vain," and so will not even pronounce it.
So Elijah's name is my God, God. He's got a double God name, is that what it is?
Yah is Lord. That's the personal name of God.
So it's my God, Lord, yeah.
The verbs in Hebrew are often understood, like the verb to be is often understood. Like a sentence will have, a lot of times it won't have a verb to be, it's just understood. So Elijah's name is his message. Yeah, God is my Lord, or the Lord is my God.
Which is what the people said when they.
Yeah.
He is the
Lord,
God.
he is the God.
Yeah.
Well, why in the world didn't we put Yahweh in the Bible instead of the Lord is my God? Why don't we say Yahweh is my God?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Never have understood it. We talk about Baal and the Lord. No, Baal and Yahweh.
Yeah. Yahweh is the personal name of God. And again, we won't get too far afield here, but
Was that also related then to why, I mean, that we would now say the Lord just not to take his name in vain? Or not?
I don't know.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
doctrinally I believe either way, I'm just saying, would that be a tradition such as them not saying God?
Well, when we're saying the Lord, we're saying Yahweh in English. So the Lord is, or Yahweh is his personal name. And it's like, at the burning bush, and he said, "This is my name." Because Moses said, "Whom shall I say sent me?" And he'll say, "Tell them Yahweh sent me." And it's based on the I am, on I will be, I am, I always will be, I shall be. I'll show myself of who I am. Yeah. And he shows himself who he is through the events of the plagues. Yet, and he says, "By this name I've not been known." Yet in Genesis, I think 4, the last verse, it says, "At that time men began to call upon the name of Yahweh." So he was known by that name, but the idea of knowing means I'm going to fill this name full of meaning now by my actions. But again, it's the personal name of God. That's why it's significant when like Rahab uses Yahweh. She uses the personal name of God. She doesn't say Elohim, probably as most Canaanites would. So, all right, well, stop there.
Well, so now, so it's Lord in English, and then is it that it has become, I mean, Lord has come to mean so much, and just a leader is the Lord, I mean,
The Lord of the house.
yeah.
Now, there's another Hebrew word, Adonai, that means Lord. And Adonai can be master, Lord, and yet I guess it's probably more tradition than anything, but in reading Hebrew, and this is the way I was taught, and when I studied with my rabbi friend in Hawaii, this is what we practice as well. When you come to the Tetragrammaton, the personal name of God, you don't pronounce that, you pronounce Adonai. So Adonai can mean Lord or Sir as well. So you have Adonai, and you have Yahweh, and you have Elohim.
That was not really mandatory until between the Testaments, was it?
I don't know the history of when
No, I don't
that
think
began.
I think I had a problem back these days.
It's just a tradition, and I don't have a problem with the tradition. It may encourage reverence, as long as it doesn't become something that's magical. Also, Jewish people today, like if you have a Hebrew Bible, maybe you're somewhere at a retreat or somewhere, you're going to lay your Bible on the floor, or you never put the text on the floor. You can put another book on the floor and then put it on top of that. But you never put the text on the floor. Well, in one sense, it's a book. It's God's Word, but we don't worship the Bible. We worship the God of the Bible, but God reveals Himself in the Bible. All right.
I grew up in a house where you didn't lay anything on the Bible.
Yeah. And
The Bible was always on top.
yes. Yeah. And I would be fine with that tradition. Okay, well, we kind of got off on a side road there, but the point is Elijah's message, or his name, is his message. And everybody's worshiping Baal. And he shows up. And
So Ahab couldn't even say his name without.
he does say his name, but I guess he
I mean, he couldn't say his
yeah.
name without saying the Lord is God. Yeah.
yeah.
The name being that significant.
At one point, Ahab, meets him and he says, well, look, or it's you, the troubler of Israel.
Yeah.
And Elijah says, I'm not the one causing trouble. You're the one causing trouble. Well, leading up to that, in chapter 17, God sends him, and this drought's going to begin, and he sends him to this widow in Zarephath, and that's up there in the area of Sidon. And Jesus uses this illustration. He's not sent to any other way, he's sent to this widow here. And that causes problems. They are going to kill Jesus after he uses this as illustration. But she says, well, I'm just going to eat our last meal, my son and I, and die. And then God works through Elijah. And then the son becomes sick, and then she says, why have you come here? You just brought bad stuff on me. It's almost like I was under the radar, and now God, it's a spotlight on me because you're here, and bad things have happened. I need to set the alarm on my phone.
I've often thought about that lady, that woman. She's just got a barely enough food for the two of them. But he says, well, feed me first.
Yeah.
And she does.
Yes. It's
And-
impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
And she's given up hope, it seems,
Right.
isn't it? I mean, she says,
What's one less meal?
yeah, may eat it and die. One note says his demand apparently so, because he says, don't fear, go and do like you said, but make me a little cake first and bring it to me, and then make for you and your son. His demand, apparently so inconsiderate, was meant to be a test of her faith in God. So she does, and God works through Elijah. But then the son dies, and then she says, well, I knew it, and you come here, and he's brought the spotlight of God on me. And Elijah goes up and stretches himself on the child 3 times, cries to the Lord. And in verse 22 of chapter 17, the Lord heard or listened to the voice of Elijah. And the soul of the child came back to him, and he revived. And then she says, well, I know then that you are a man of God, and the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. Not just true, but absolute truth. And so that's a full expression of faith there. All right, questions, comments on 17?
Is there any significance about how he chose to stretch himself over?
I don't know. I don't know.
I know Herbert Armstrong didn't believe that because I wrote to him We had discussion on it.
You and Herbert Armstrong, what did he say?
Herbert Armstrong didn't believe that we have a soul.
Oh, okay. And y'all talked about this verse?
Yeah. He just didn't believe it.
All right. Chapter 18 is pretty famous. And we can't spend a lot of time here, but you know, this is the history of Israel, and Elijah is part of Israel, and it's recorded here in this book. So we need to spend some time. So God says, "Go show yourself to Ahab, and I'll send rain on the land." And he has to do that because the rain's not going to come, he says, until my word. So go show yourself. And he went to show himself to Ahab. And Ahab, we're introduced to Obadiah, and he feared the Lord greatly, and he had even taken and hidden some prophets, hadn't he? And he's a servant of Ahab, and they're out there looking for water and grass for horses and mules to keep them alive. This would have to do probably with the army as well. And they're passing through. And in verse 7, as Obadiah is on the way, behold, surprise, Elijah meets him. And he fell on his face. And he says, "Is it you?" And he says, "Yeah, it's me." Behold, Elijah. And he knew him. Adoni, my Lord, or Sir. It's me. And then he says, well, it's almost like the widow, same attitude, isn't it? How have I sinned? Because he said, I need you to go tell Ahab I'm here. And he said, how have I sinned? Because what's going to happen? I mean, you know, I go tell him, then you're gone, and he's going to kill me. Everybody's looking for you anyway, and he's even taken an oath. And he said, no, go tell him I'll be here. And so he went and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. And this is that statement in verse 17. When he met, Ahab said to him, is it you, you troubler of Israel? And he said, I have not troubled Israel, you have. In your father's house, that you've forsaken the commandments. And so they're going to set up this contest, and we've talked, I think, a little bit more about this in the past. But it's going to be on Mount Carmel. That's in Phoenician territory. That's home field advantage. It's between the prophets of Baal, and what's the contest? What are they to pray? What's going to happen? What they want to happen in the contest?
Sacrifice will be burned up.
Yeah, and fire will come down from heaven. And that's Baal's specialty. He's not asking Baal to do something Baal doesn't know how to do. That's what Baal does. In fact, those little statues, you search on the internet, search Baal statue, and he's throwing a lightning bolt down from heaven. He brings fire from heaven. So that's the special. It's almost like Elijah is saying, that's what he does, isn't it? Can't you do this?
Should be a
Well,
piece of cake.
he's supposed to have sent rain because
Exactly.
that's his thing.
Yeah.
He's a fertility god.
Yeah,
And he couldn't, all these years, he hasn't sent any rain.
that's right. Yeah. It's almost like,
So it's like,
a mockery. And then Elijah tells these prophets, you go first. And then they cry out, and they halt around. And before that, Elijah says to all the people in verse 21, and probably, I guess, that's representatives. It's not all the people there on Mount Carmel. Everybody's not going to fit on Mount Carmel. But it's probably representatives. And he says, how long are you going to halt or limp between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal, follow him. But the people didn't answer. answered not a word. And that's almost picking up on a theme that's going to come later, because they cry to Baal and there's no answer. And so Elijah lets them go first, tells them to go first. Even they choose, the bull, cut it in pieces, and make sure everything's fair. It's above the board here. And they cry out to God, and then there's no voice, no answer. And they danced around in verse 26. They danced in a halting way. It's the same verb. It's an intensive form of the verb where Elijah says, how long are you going to halt between two opinions? They're halting around now, really halting, jumping around. These prophets of Baal. Dancing around. And at noon, Elijah mocks them, and he says, you cry louder. Cry in a strong voice. And it doesn't really make sense, because he says cry in a strong voice because he is a God. Because he's strong, I guess you need to be louder. You would think you don't have to shout to a God. God has the power to hear you. Anyway, so he's mocking them, and he says he may be meditating, he may be busy, he may have gone to a private place, he might be relieving himself, he be sleeping. Yeah.
I just cannot read this without laughing.
Yeah.
He is just having a good
Gone to the bathroom. Yeah.
Was Elijah doing something wrong? No. I don't think he was.
I mean, it's like I preached. Where are you in Jeremiah, Scotty?
Chapter 11.
Well, you've passed me. I'm in 10. I was at 10 this past week. But talk about idolatry, and Jeremiah and Isaiah.
Yeah.
That's a
Tree down.
a halting. It's really biting irony against idolatry. They can't do anything. You go cut a tree down, it's cold in your workshop, and you cut the tree in half, and you burn part of it, and you're carving the other, or you burning your God, or, carving up firewood. And so that's basically what Elijah's doing here, I think. And so they cried aloud, cut themselves with swords, and there's no voice, there's no answer.
All that's for the benefit of the people who are there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
To get them to see, this is
Yep.
pretty stupid, isn't it?
Yeah. And so then it's Elijah's turn, and he builds the altar, and they pour water over it several times to make sure it's not going to be spontaneous combustion. And, I think it's National Enquirer. I was probably about junior or something in college, undergrad. And I was in a grocery store, and I saw in the checkout line, it's National Enquirer, and the headline on there was like, "Preacher goes up in flames, the most amazing thing of spontaneous combustion." And so I bought it, and I'm pretty sure I still have that somewhere. And they gave the record, like, we were sitting there listening, and all of a sudden, he's gone. And so Elijah wants to make sure, that it's not that.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah. So pour water all over the altar and into the trough around the altar, and it's a pretty big trench.
I wonder where they got that water.
Yeah, in the midst of a drought, they're pouring
Exactly.
water.
Yeah.
They hauled it out of the, that was Mediterranean Sea. It was a long way down there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're on top of a mountain, so yeah.
Are you going to this place when you go?
Mount Carmel?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I don't remember. Do y'all remember? Is Mount Carmel on the... I've seen it from, I haven't been there, I've just seen it. So,
It's a fierce statue there, I'll tell you. That guy, Elijah's ugly.
yeah, I've seen a picture of the statue, yeah. So, yeah, I don't know where they got all the water. It's a lot of water. They have to fill this big trench too. And then Elijah prays to God, and fire comes down from heaven. They fell on their faces, and they say in verse 39, Yahweh, Adonai hu Elohim, Adonai, or Yahweh hu Elohim, Yahweh hu. The Lord, He is God. The Lord, He is God. And Elijah says, take the prophets of Baal, don't let them escape. And they brought them down to the brook Kishon. And then he says to Ahab, get up and eat and drink. I guess he's witnessing the whole thing. Get up and eat and drink. And there's the sound of abundance of rain. And he went to eat and drink. And Elijah went to the top of Carmel, bowed to the ground, with his face between his knees, concentrated meditation. And he said to his servant, Jewish tradition says this servant is that son of that widow who came back from the dead. We don't know, it's just his servant here. And he looked and he said, there's nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. And he came the 7th time and he said, there's this cloud coming out of the sea as small as a man's hand. And he said, go tell Ahab, get ready your chariot, go down and don't let the rain stop you. And he came, or in a little while the storm came. And then the last verse, so Ahab rode, went to Jezreel, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins, and he ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. I read an article on the internet, and it was talking about this, the hand of the Lord is on Elijah, and they said, from my research, I found a chariot's about 35 miles an hour, and so Elijah must be running at least 25 or 35 miles an hour, and they said God gave him this tremendous speed to run that. That's not, I don't think that's the point of this. A couple of times, 1 Samuel 8, verse 11, 2 Samuel 15, 1, you have a royal person in a chariot, and there are runners ahead of that chariot. 50 runners, I think, with Absalom. And it's showing respect for the royal person that's in the chariot. And I'd say that's what Elijah is doing. Elijah is not interested in political revolution. He's interested in Ahab repenting and that there would be spiritual revival in the nation. Elijah's not saying, well, I'm going to get you off the throne and politically. Elijah, I think, is still showing respect for God, God's king. Even though he's bad, even though he's Ahab, he's still showing that respect. So
kind of like David and Saul.
I think
He
so.
would not put his hand to the Lord's anointed.
I think so. Exactly what it would mean, I don't think it means he's running faster than the chariot to outrun it.
So mine says he outran, but the side note said ran before.
Yeah,
Before is correct.
yeah, it's
Ran ahead.
But not like, choom.
he ran. Yeah. I think even that article mentioned the flash. Crazy. And the whole, of course, the point of the article was, you don't know what God you can do if the hand of the Lord comes on you. I mean, the Hebrew says he ran before the face of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. So he ran in front of Ahab. And I don't think Ahab is going 35 miles an hour in a chariot anyway in the middle of a storm and coming off that mountain in all the different ways. So I would understand it.
He's probably saying, drive this thing as slow as you can. I don't want to have to tell Jezebel what just happened.
Well, 1901, Ahab told Jezebel all that happened.
Drive very slowly.
All right, thoughts, questions on 18?
You know, what's interesting to me in this chapter, in verse 19, it says, in addition to the 450 prophets of Baal, there are 400 prophets of Asherah.
Yes,
And they're never mentioned again.
yes, that's right.
That's the only reference to them.
My
So-
question was, yeah, I had a question about that.
And the prophets of Baal are the ones that are executed.
Right, right, dude, that,
So the 400 were not.
apparently
I don't know.
or, you know, they're just never mentioned again, period. So.
I don't know.
know what the deal is about that exactly.
Maybe they cut out there pretty early. I don't know.
I
When
think
they
once-
saw the
I
lack
think
of-
once Elijah started mocking them, they said,
When they,
we're out of here.
yeah, when they saw the lack of.
We're next.
Yeah, I think we got an appointment.
Yeah.
Supposed to be down at the Orpheum.
Okay, well, I didn't think I would get through with the section that was allotted to me, but we will.
I always love I think almost every translation, verse 38, it says the fire licked up the water.
Yeah.
And I just love that word picture there, that it licked up, you just see this big ball of flame just, going around in that trench, and it's dry when it's finished.
Let me see.
It also consumed the
Dust
rocks.
and the rocks.
Yeah,
Rocks
yeah,
and the
everything, yeah.
dust.
Yeah, wood, stone,
I can drink
dust.
the water, but the rocks and the
Yeah,
dust.
yeah, took it all.
That's pretty powerful stuff there.
That would have made the National Enquirer back then, in Samaria.
The burnt offering.
That would have been all over the internet.
In
wouldn't it?
Sidon, that'd been the National Enquirer for Sidon.
The wood, the
I
stones,
just take Ben for a National Enquirer type of guy.
the dust. Well, it just was. I was standing there in the line, and I saw it.
Impulse buy.
Yeah. The verb that's used there, licked up, it means a call to eat. It consumed. It just, and it consumed all those different things. That one verb is used with burnt offering, with the wood, the stones, the dust, and the water.
Consumed is used in the New King James. Consumed is used in the first part of the chapter.
Yeah.
Licked up on that part.
And it wasn't just burned, it was gone.
It was vaporized.
It was gone.
Yeah. Wonder what it looked like. I mean, is it like the Oppenheimer? Okay, well, we're going to stop there, and next week we'll look at the aftermath of that. And again, we can't spend a lot of time on that, but I do have some things to, I guess, wrestle with or bring up about this, whatever this that follows the fire in front of the cave. The Hebrew is, I don't know, a sound that's a small speechless sound, still small silence, I don't know. But
The sound of a gentle blowing.
yeah, it's translated different ways. Okay, we'll talk about that next week. Any final thing you want to say?
Yeah, may I have 90 seconds?
You may.
Thank you. When I talk to young people and quote Moses, I have to tell them I wasn't there personally.
That's good, yeah.
But I do have a quote from Gus Nichols, and I was there personally.
Yeah.
Brother Gus was teaching a class like you're teaching this one. He went over to Mount Carmel, and he said the sky was clear. And he said, I kept looking at the sky, and he said, there appeared in the sky a cloud about the size of a man's hand.
Huh.
He said that. And he said, I watched it, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we had a rain after a while like you've never seen. So, Brother Gus, did that really happen? But he said it did.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
I don't think I doubt him, but I didn't know him. I've heard him, but didn't know him.
You were talking about that old prophet and the young prophet. One preacher that we had come to my little congregation said that a friend of his was out in Texas, and he was going by this church, and it was they were speaking in tongues, and he just went on in and said, "Does anybody understand what she's saying?" "No, we don't." He said, "Well, I can tell you exactly." So he got up and started preaching to him.
I can tell you.
How can they argue against that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
They don't know what she's saying.
He got them on a technicality, I think.
Clarify that.
Yeah,
Clarify that first.
technicality.
Tell you what exactly.
Elijah's interesting because he just sort of just comes out of nowhere
He does.
and does all these
And it
incredible
goes to
things.
nowhere.
Yeah.
He just disappears.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's always, I mean, it's
Designated son.
very entertaining and it's dramatic and it's, okay, well, we'll stop there. Greg, will you lead our closing prayer, please?
Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for this time we have together to study your word. Father, we pray you continue to bless us as you see that we need. Care for us as we travel home this evening and forgive us we sin in Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you, Greg. Somehow or another, we'll get caught up.